Welcome back, ladies and gentlemen, to another episode of the Fresh Crits of Melbourne. Does this place look familiar to you? It probably does if you've ever booked the wrong airport. Instead of flying out of Tullamarine, you've booked it out of Avalon, or you've done this race before. This footage I've been sitting on now for exactly 1 year, and I thought, hey, what better time to do an edit than a couple of weeks before the 2025 edition of the Melbourne to Warranmbool road race, the longest race in the southern hemisphere, I think it is. This is my second edition of doing this race, and I thought, hey, what better time to put it edit and get it up online for those who are doing the race this year. Unfortunately, myself, I will not be attending. I'm at a wedding. For some reason, a cyclist friend of mine decided to book a wedding over the best cycling race of the year, but we're not going to get started on that. It is a fantastic race. A couple of moments. This is just coming out of the airport. This speed hump, it's always been there, but everyone still manages to brake check themselves and crash and almost cause a pileup coming in. So during this one, I wore the cameras front and rear, and I've spent hours upon hours of getting the data overlay sorted because I don't actually know where I pressed the GoPro on and off. Obviously, the GoPro battery is not going to last 7 hours. So I had to pinpoint the exact moments by looking for street signs and random things. And so I've brought this footage to you guys. We're coming out of Avalon Airport here, and if I was to give anyone a tip in this exact moment, is, as you can see, there's a bottle. Someone's already lost a bottle on the right. That is the worst. There goes 120 grams of carbs. It's the last thing you want. Coming out of the airport, everybody is nervous. They're toey. Tell you what, if this is your first time, just relax. Sit at the back. You're not going to lose the race sitting at the back, but you will lose the race if you crash at the back of someone or someone crashes at the back of you and snaps off your derailleur. So just chill out. There's no need to rush. There's no need to rush. As soon as you get to the highway, the peloton will spread across the road, you'll see shortly, and you've got every opportunity to move up. So this particular edition of the Melbourne to Warranmbool took place on the 3rd of February, which obviously is Saturday, and the race starts 8 o'clock sharp, but I recommend everyone to get there a couple of hours before. Maybe that's too early, but I like to be early for things, otherwise I'm late. As you see, this guy in the Bridge Lane kit warming up his tyres. I'm not too sure what the go is there. Get there early, pin numbers on, do your bike checks, get your nutrition sorted, all that kind of stuff. Just get there early. The gates open early enough, and you don't know with Melbourne what's going on with the roadworks. This one I was racing with the Race Atlas team. We all had radios except for me because my radio kept tuning into the police, and that's the last thing I wanted to hear, so I ditched the radio. So I was flying blind, but that's fine with me. I didn't need anybody chatting in my ear. I'm a rogue unit. I like to fly solo. So we were racing again for Race Atlas. So on the team, we were all riding for Dean, who was in a whole bunch of form, coming off a really good ride up at Nationals in Buninyong this year. We had Lewis Bull on the team, flying. Hutto with SulNutrition was flying. We also had Fonz was on the team. We had Pappas on the team. Geordie, I think, was injured. He'd had a crash, so he wasn't riding this time. And we also had Mason, Matthew Gray, who jumped in a break very early in this race, and a couple of others, I believe. Now, very early in this race, there was a bit of a crash, and a few guys got caught up with it. So we were basically left with myself, Hutto, Dino, Lewis, and Pappas. The rest of the guys had to retire unhurt, but hurt bikes, which is sad. So but it's awesome. Like, this is my hands down favorite race of the year. I encourage every single person who races or even rides their bike in a competitive sort of format. Remember, this is a race. This is not a Grand Fondo. This is a proper race. The roads are closed in a sort of a rolling closure sort of thing. And you need people to help you. You're riding from Melbourne to Warranmbool. It is a 280-kilometre bike ride. It can take you up to 7 hours. So it's not for the faint-hearted, but if you want something to train for, this is an incredible experience. Why it is so great is because number one, it's a mass start where all the grades start together. So you have guys in the NRS, you have NRS that are unsupported, and then you have A grade, B grade, C grade. So it's pretty much on, and you can tell the difference between all the riders by looking at the numbers. So all the guys that are riding in, I think it's the NRS, have numbers from like 1 to 100 and something. And then as soon as you go to like B grade, their numbers are like 200, C grade is 300. So you'll be able to identify which grade people are in based on the numbers on their back. It's a little bit of a squeezy point here. 5 minutes in, like I said before, this is make or break. So you don't really want to be riding up the backside of someone and ruining your race only 6 minutes in. Although thankfully the pace is off now. Everyone's those early jitters have now left everyone as we're kind of just cruising our way out of the airport, finally making our way onto the Princess Highway, which is like 5 lanes wide. It's incredible to have that entire road to ourselves. For this race, we could talk a little bit about nutrition. I was pushing for about 80 to 100 grams of carbs an hour. That was the goal. If I got there, it's hard to say. I found that I had a lot of my carbs in bottles. I think I took, like, on my bike, 2 750 ml bottles, those big chunkers that you can pick up at your local bike shop. Similar to the ones that Brendan's got here on the left, those real big SIS ones. They had a heap of carbs in them. And then I loaded my pockets with rice cakes. I was loving rice cakes at the time with sultanas in them. I think I had like 8 in my back pocket. So they were just awesome to munch on because, to be honest, when you're sitting on the bike for 6 to 7 hours, nutrition fatigue becomes a thing. Nico was talking about it the other day. You do get sick of eating sweet stuff. Even if you think you love all the sweet food in the world, if you have to eat only sweet food for 6 hours, you're going to get very sick of it and you're not going to want to eat it. So it's good to have a mixture of savory and sweet in your pockets. I definitely, unless you can do it all the time, I definitely don't recommend you eating gels, like, you know, a gel every 20 minutes. You'll get super sick, and the last thing you want to do is get stomach cramps or anything like that. You really need to make sure you mix it up, is what I'm saying. Have a mixture of carbs in your bottles, SulNutrition, but also have some nice bars, energy bars, you know, Cliff bars and that sort of thing that you can just munch on as you go. Now you can see we're on the Princess Highway. How awesome is this? And there's always going to be motorbikes screaming up, but they're going to be on their horns. You've just got to stay focused. This is a race where you can't really sit up. You can't really rest. You've got to be switched on mentally the entire time, and that's probably the hardest thing. Yes, turning the pedals, it's you know, it's tough, but being switched on and watching where your front wheel is and watching what's going up the road is even more important. Here comes a bit of a sprint off the front, a bit of an attack, and everyone's just kind of marking that. So fortunately for Race Atlas, we had Maddie Gray jump in the early break right at the start of this race and rode solo for, man, I don't know if it was like 30, 40 minutes or something, but it was awesome watching our teammate fly up the road. Now, we knew that move was never going to stick, but it was just great, and it gave us in the team a whole bunch of encouragement that we could, you know, do that sort of thing as well. So it was great to see him up off the front. Got Hollywood here on the right-hand side. He is always doing this race. He does a lot of Ks. You can check out his Strava. He's always out there turning the pedals over. In terms of equipment, I was on the Scott Addict for this one, but I definitely recommend running your full aero spec setup, so deep rims, because yes, the hills are punchy, but you're going to be riding at above 40 Ks for the majority of the race. So aero is going to play a much bigger part than having really shallow rims just to get you up those hills. So I'm at the front of the bike race, and this is a great spot to be. Yes, you're going to be copping a little bit of wind, but you're going to be avoiding all the chaos in the back. And I guess the question is, where should you be in the bunch? And I'm going to put it back to you, is it depends on what your goals are for this race. Do you want to get in the early break? Then yes, you want to be at the front. Do you back yourself to stay out of trouble in the back of the race? Then you can ride at the back of the race. However, keep in mind, there are a lot of different riders out here with very different skill levels. Some are racing NRS, the top of Australian cycling, and then you get old mates that are in C grade that just want to finish the race and don't really care about being in the front group. So you've got to play your cards right. You've got to be smart about where you want to ride. Personally, I tend to be at the front of the race, probably to my detriment, because I end up burning a lot of matches and, can't stay with it. But it does allow me to keep out of trouble, which for this race was very important. It is because there was a crash very early on. Touch of wheels is all it takes, and brings the whole peloton down, and then they're off. They ride away from you, and you're never going to see them again. So here's a classic first attack, and every time you look down at your Garmin and you see big numbers, say anything above 3, you're burning matches, so you've just got to be mindful of that. And I guess that brings up an interesting point, is talking about your Garmin or your Wahoo or whatever you want to run. What screens do you want to have up there? To be honest, there is no point in having speed, power data, heart rate or anything like that. All I had up on my screen is different course points or waypoints. I had the route loaded onto my Garmin, and basically had it so I marked important moments of the race. So that could be feed zones, sprint points, corners, because when you do get into those crosswinds, knowing when you're turning left or when you're turning right, or even knowing when to move up in the race, because when you get into a corner, the peloton speeds up because they want to be first into the corner, is really, really important. But most importantly, what I have in there is bergs, hills. It is so important to know, as look as I'm getting swarmed here. As soon as you lay off the gas, you get absolutely swarmed, and when you were once at the front, you're now at the back, and that's the washing machine effect, which I'll talk about a little bit later. Going back to the Garmin, I loved having the hills in there. Yes, you can have on your stem the course outline, or you can have it written down and on a bit of marker of where those points are, but I just found it so much easier to flick through pages on my Garmin to see where those climbs are and when they will be, because if I know that there's a climb in 3Ks, I start moving my way up. I don't burn matches, I just start moving my way up into at the front of the race, so that when we hit that climb, I'm at the pointy end of the race, not because I'm going to win the comm or I'm going to try to go for the comm points or anything like that. No. The only reason I want to be at the front of the race is so that when the hitters whack it, I can filter back, but still stay with the main group. I'm not going to be doing 700 watts up those climbs. Instead, I'll be doing 300, 400, and just letting myself fall backwards. As you see, Matty Gray, there he goes. He's flown off the front. How good is that? So good. You saw him off in the distance there. So good. And the group, the peloton, seems to be pretty happy with that move, so everyone kind of sits up and lets it go for the moment, but I'm sure in a matter of time they're going to spark some attacks. This is a good moment here. Blackshaw's racing. Look at some of the nutrition he's got here. He's got a flask, one of those soft flasks, filled with, I imagine it would be just gel, like lots of gels or sugar water or something. They're great to have because you can load up, 6 gels or whatever in them without, and you can just pop the top off and squirt it into your mouth and pop it back on and then chuck it in your back pocket without having to muck around with tearing the gel wrappers and then having sticky gel residue all in your back. Now, that's a great idea until you drop one, and then you've essentially dropped 6 gels. So that's something else you can consider for these races. Another little tip that I liked that Tommy Gallagher told me is Cliff Bars. They're super. My favourite, I think, is choc chip, or even the peanut butter one sometimes on the right occasion. They're delicious. Is because they are pretty chewy to eat. He would cut the tops off his, and then he'd take a couple of bites and then stuff it either up his jersey, if he's not running a skinny, or even up your nicks, up your pants leg, and just have it resting there so that, if you ever wanted to grab another bite, you can just whip it out of your pants leg, have a bit of a chew, and off you go again. So that's a couple of little tips that I found, just to make sure you're constantly eating or drinking. I'd obviously also set little reminders if you can, or little alerts on your Garmin, just to remind yourself to eat. A little alert every 20 or 30 minutes, just to remind you to have a swig of water or have a bite of food to eat, because you can forget. It's pretty on. Both hands are on the bars. Look how close we are to these two riders here. It's like this for a lot of the race, and you can get stressed out and other things on your mind, and you can forget. So, doing all those little things do definitely help. So we're still on the highway, and I've just jumped ahead of the bunch here for no particular reason, except I just wanted to get a rear cam view of all the riders in this race, because how cool is that? You know, it's probably, you know, 8:15 in the morning. We have the entire road to ourselves, and I'm riding in the middle of it. How awesome is that? So there's a nice little bit of footage with Luke Burns in the Bridgelane kit, and Lewis on my wheel, probably giving me some kind advice. The trusty sound of my Garmin is informing me that we're making our first turn of the race. You can see the map that's extremely big, or long rather, on the bottom right hand side. This is our first corner we're going to be making. It's a veer left. As you can see, the police motorbike's pointing us in the right direction, where to go. I actually know one of those guys. I work with him, which is a fun fact. We make a veering left, and then it's a sharp right, so be ready. Now, in terms of positioning, it's a really good time to talk about it. I try to avoid as much as I can to be riding in the gutter there. Why, might you ask? Is because there's a whole bunch of crap on the roads. Glass, sharp rocks, and all that stuff can puncture your tires and end up ending your race prematurely. And that's the last thing you want. So make sure you try to avoid riding in the gutter unless, you know, it's really, really important. So here we are. We're making this right-hand turn here. The screech of brakes, we get nice and slow, keep it all together, hit that apex, and then it's a mad sprint straight out, bang. Here's a match being burnt, 900 watts to stay with the main group, and this is why it's so important to be at the front of the race in moments like this, especially, well, not so much now because you've got fresh legs, but further on the race, you're not going to have that same snap. Your legs are going to be fatigued, you're going to be mentally cooked as well, so you want to get to the front of that bike race because that concertina effect being back down here is amplified. Because if the guys at the front are coming out of that corner and say 600 watts, the guys at the back are going to be scrambling 600, 700, 800 watts for a lot longer to stay with it. Look at Hollywood's pain face in the rear cam there just to stay with the main group. It's hard. It's hard. And then, as we all know, everyone sits up and it's all fine. It's crazy, isn't it? That's bike racing for you. So when it does swell up again and you are further back in the race, try to move up. When the pace is slow, you try to move up and you find someone who's moving up with you. You got you got that passing lane. We've got Isaac. I think it's Isaac at the front here. I think that might be Jack Marshall. I'm sorry if I get these names wrong. It's hard to know. Find those guys and move up with them so you're not pushing the wind. I tried to play a mental game with myself, is try to stay out of the wind as long as I can, I guess. You'll constantly play games with yourself in this race to keep yourself focused, so I definitely encourage you all to do the same. So I've moved up. I see Dean on the left-hand side. He's been riding good posse all race, and this is when a little move goes up, and I've been caught at the front. So I, again, play that little game with myself. I'm not the one that has to close the gap. I'll let the others do that, but I'll follow in the slipstream, and that's exactly what I do here. There's Aiden there, so I move over to the left-hand side. Stay in those top 15, 20 wheels. Stay in the draft, ride good posse, stay out of trouble, and make sure you're staying as aero as you can. Here goes another attack. So at this stage, the breakaway, I believe, has been brought back, and try to say that 10 times. And now it's the riders are trying to do what they can just to get away, to get in that break. We're 41 minutes into this race with a 243 kilometers left. So for the sake of the story, pretty early on in this race. In a crit, you got 10 minutes to go. In this, you've probably got another 6 hours. So it's not super important to be, staying at the very front of the race, but just making sure you're following the moves, staying in those top 20 wheels, and being aero as much as you can is very, very important. We've got CJ on the left-hand side here, super strong rider. He was in so much form for this race. So look at all the teams lining up and almost launching for a sprint or a comm. No. Those riders are trying to move themselves up because we've got a left-hand corner coming up. And this is why it's so important to have this sort of information so you understand what's going on in the race before it actually happens. It's really, really key, just so you can get through these corners and obstacles and road furniture, or whatever it might be, without any issues. So we've come through that corner and bang, it's straight on the gas again. 900 watts straight out of the corner. But I almost promise you, if you were further up in that race, it wouldn't be nearly as many watts. But that's what happens when you're sitting further in the back of the bike race. But we'll skip forward in this one and pick up where there's a bit more action. Enjoy. All right, our first crunch point in the race. Now, check out the new little graph I've brought in for the Melbourne Warranmbool. Look at this little altitude meter in the bottom right-hand corner here. That's showing, you know, elevation and gradient and all that kind of fun stuff, because I think that's really important in this one to kind of highlight where you are at every given moment, because the road always looks flat no matter where you are. Now, just around 50 minutes into this race, and, you know, normally if you're maybe new to the Melbourne Warranmbool, you've been pretty comfortable riding with the bunch. You know, you've gotten used to following the attacks and your legs have started to come good, and you started to relax a little bit. Now, what can happen is once you relax, you start finding yourself moving further and further back in the peloton, because you're not as sharp, you're not as switched on and staying moving up with the wheels. And then a climb like this happens, a real steep, short, punchy one, that's really ramping up, 500 watts, and you quickly find yourself at the back of the race and little splits are opening up. And if you find yourself where the little gaps are happening, that could almost be race over, and then you've got a long old bike ride all the way back to Warranmbool, 6-7 hours on your own, which is definitely what you don't want to do. So this is why it's so important to make sure you're switched on, keeping alert, playing those games with yourself, counting down the kilometers until X, counting down before the the sprint, whatever. You saw that sign on the left-hand side. 500 meters to go till we get to the comp point. I'm like, perfect, I've made it over. I can start to move back in the race, and, you know, I'm not going for comp points or whatever. But while this is happening, a couple of our friends have been dropped off the back. Yeah, they're gone, and they can't get back. You know, all it might take is a little touch of wheels, a little pile up at the back, or maybe a couple little splits. People can't follow things along as I give Derek a cheeky little nudge to get moving forward. And then that's the race over for you. So it is so important to not only have the best legs that you can have, you know, by tapering and all that, but really also important to make sure that you're staying mentally switched on. Maybe you can take a couple of caffeine tabs along the way if that's your thing, up to you. But yeah, that's just a little quick one there. Okay, 75 minutes in, and it's dinner time, or lunchtime, or brunch, but there's no smashed avos today. This is the feed zone for the first feed zone of the race, actually. And but fortunately for me and the Race Atlas guys, is we're feeding from the car, so we can avoid the chaos that comes with this race. And there is a hell of a lot of chaos as we get closer to the feed zone here, because all it takes is a touch of wheels, people come down, and it is not a good place. And that's what happens to one of our good friends, Dill here. As you see shortly, it's only a matter of time now. A lock of brakes, a touch of wheels, and a man ends up on the ground, and that does end his race. So here it is here. Catch him on the left-hand side. There he is, the poor guy. I think he did his collarbone not good, and it's chaos. But the rest of us that feed from the cars just able to avoid it. The poor guy, that does ruin his season, I believe, but he's come back better and stronger than ever. He's tearing it up now at Tour of Bright and all that kind of stuff. So that's the feed zone. Now, if you are a rider that is having to be fed on the side of the road via water or swanny bags, whatever that might be, definitely practice it before you do it, because look at us coming in here, 47 kilometers an hour. You want to be hitting that bag at, say, 30 Ks minimum. You know, easier said than done. If you saw my last video, I was hitting it at like 5 Ks because I was so nervous. But it is really, really important, because you got to keep that speed, you got to keep that momentum, because as soon as you pass through, or even during the feed zone, there are guys smacking it up the road to get across. So that's feed zone number 1. I think there's 4 feed zones in the race, and they're always extremely exciting.
Oh, dude, I had the worst stage fright. The worst.
Have a guess what we've just done. Yep, that was our first nature break. I think Keenan calls it piss stop. And it is a time not to get stage fright. It is very stressful, actually. So you got to pick your moment really, really well. And actually speaking with Alex Edney, proper sprinter who races with us at Masters in Glenvale, really strong rider. He had a pit stop with one of the riders. This is when he did the Warranmbool, and never managed to get back onto the race. And him telling me that has haunted me ever since. That probably gives me the stage fright, to be honest. Now, how do you do it? Well, it's inevitably you're going to have to stop for a wee. Now, there's two options. Is you can have a teammate push you whilst you urinate off the bike. Don't point it in the direction of the peloton, point it away. But that's gross. So don't do that. Don't do it. The other option is, which is the most preferred, is, and what I have done in the last 2 times I've done this race, is I've waited until the major teams have pulled over and pull over with them to stop. And then as soon as they zip up and are ready to go, you got to cut that stream short and get back on your bike. So I stopped right next to Bento, who's been on the channel before. Massive shout out. He's currently recovering from a wrist injury, so we send our love to him. So I stopped next to him, had a wee, and as soon as he pulled the ripcord, I pulled the ripcord, and bang, I was back on the pedals riding in the convoy. These are all the team cars that we're riding past here. So you're riding in the convoy and you just got a glimpse up the road there of the main peloton. So that's what you got to do. Stop with the major teams, so stop with the ARAs, stop with the bridge lanes, stop with cage park up guys, stop with all those hitters, and as soon as they zip up, you zip up, and off you go. We're getting a hell of a lot deeper into this race now. 151 Ks to go. We've been on the pedals for almost 3 hours now. And it's a long race. So we're over halfway, which is nice. We still have probably another 3 hours to go though. But yeah, 151 Ks left of a 270 K race. It's you're going to be on the pedals for a while, and it's starting to get hot. And this is the sort of thing I'm saying is you forget to eat, you forget to drink. So having those little reminders, getting your teammates to remind you, hey, have you had a Cliff Bar, have you had a rice cake, have you had a drink of water, is really, really important. So this is another sprint. No, this is another climb, I believe. We're definitely going uphill. You can tell, even in a little graph that I've made, we're going uphill here. So I'm riding good posi. I'm happy with where I am. This is good. This is where you want to be on these climbs. You don't need to be at the front of the race, but you don't want to be at the back. So I'm riding nice posi, and I'm letting riders pass me. I'm doing 200 watts, which is fine. Now, you might be thinking, yeah, Steve, 200 watts, man, I do that in my sleep. Yeah, well, do you do 200 watts after you've ridden already 3 hours on the bike? That 200 watts isn't the same as you waking up and doing 200 watts, son. So you just got to keep that in mind. Your legs do get fatigued, and it's not about who does the highest normalized power, who has the max power. It's who has done the less watts in these sorts of events. So we're working our way up. You keep wanting to look up the road to see what's going on, but also don't forget to look around, because it's those little moments where you do catch a glimpse of some nice countryside that takes your mind off the pain that you're inflicting on your body, and it does make that time pass a little bit quicker. All right, we've skipped forward just a touch, and as you can see, as soon as the hill has been crested, that's when the teams like to press on the pedals a little bit harder to split the group, because we've made it over the top of the climb. We're going into a descent now, but the guys that are further back in the peloton haven't quite made it over yet, and they're now having to sprint over the top and then sprint downhill to stay with a fast-moving peloton. So you can hear the motorbikes. You also hear me telling Dino that in 11 Ks we're going to be turning left, or giving him some direction, letting him know what's going on. As you can see, this Blackshaw's rider doing option 1, which I don't recommend you do. Thank God I don't have a rear cam on there, and smart that I've just turned the camera off at the right moment. We'll skip forward in this one. Who can forget the forgotten heroes driving the car for Race Atlas? Here we go. Let's see the exchange, how this plays out. We've got Fulch.
Keep riding. Get us down here.
Fulch driving. We've got Lockie in the front seat handing out the bottles. And in the back, we've got Fonz, who was taken out in that crash very early on in this race. So I'm just collecting bottles and gels here, where I'm going to take them back to the front of the race for the boys. Now, I think I'm half decent at riding no hands, but riding no hands with getting wind buffeted off the car at 40 k's, it's actually quite challenging. You feel like a pro doing this. It's so much fun. So doing that little sticky gel exploded one right in my hand, so not ideal. But just to get a little bit of a rest, because you're still on the gas.
Is that back as well? Do you want to do a sticky bit on? You got another bit in? Yeah, just ride back up to the front. You go. That's it. You good? You good?
And that's a wrap.
Good God.
That's a pretty successful exchange. First time ever doing that. Wasn't too bad at all. So that was that's the exchange. That's how it all plays out. We'll skip back into this race.
Pelo with some bottles and some gels.
So for those that might be asking, what's the best way to approach this race? Well, I'm going to give you my own opinion on it based on the only 2 times that I've done it. So if you are seeking some better advice, ask someone else. But since we're here, the way I looked at this race is breaking it up into 3 different climbs, which are marked here. And then once you've made it over that last climb, you just got to worry about the crosswind. So the first climb comes really, really early in the race at around 40-ish kilometers. Now, that one's fine. We mentioned it earlier in this video. You just need to make sure once you get off the highway, you are keeping up in good wheels, because the last thing you want is to be trailing off the back and then a split to form in front of you. Once we make it over that climb, the race kind of simmers down a little bit. Hopefully the brake has gone away and gone up the road, and the peloton kind of punches the clutch in a little bit and rides quite easily. You don't need to worry about the next climb that occurs at around 120 kilometers, where it takes place just after you've gone through Colac. Now, the climb itself does look pretty scary on the map, but don't be too freaked out. It's about an 8-minute climb, and looking at my data from this climb, I averaged about 300 watts. So I'm was like 70-ish kilos for this, so you know, you can do the math. It's a climb that most people are going to be able to get over and done with. Keeping in mind though, you've got 120 k's in the legs of surgy racing, so just keep that in mind. Make sure you're fueled for that one. The race then again simmers out after you come down that climb, because it's basically all downhill until you reach the 3rd and final climb at around 180 k's into the race. This has been, over my 2 occasions of doing this race, the most dangerous part of the course. And I don't mean dangerous as sketchy, as in dangerous as in the race splits apart. The reason that is because that climb occurs just out of Timboon. You make a left-hand turn, and why that's important is because it goes from a headwind or a tailwind straight into crosswinds. And what the teams tend to do is they will smash that climb, smash over the top of it, and smash down the descent, because what they're looking to do is split the race. When you look at the map, the climb doesn't necessarily seem too hard, but you can see there is 2 steps, and those 2 steps took me about 14 minutes, and I averaged 342 watts normalized and about 315 average. So that's with 180 k's in the legs. So this is what split me. And this is where I lost contact with the main group and blew apart, which was really disappointing. That doesn't necessarily have to be you. You don't have to be a watt monster. If you ride good position, you're able to stay with the main group. Unfortunately, I had a lapse of concentration. I was too far back. They smacked it up this climb, and I was distanced. I was actually sprinting downhill in order to get into the draft, but it was all too late, because when those crosswinds came in, the boys put it in the gutter and there was no draft to be had. From there, we chased for about 40 minutes, but alas, it was too hard. The convoy was going too quick and we couldn't get back on. So don't make the same mistake I did. Make sure you're riding good position at around kilometer 170, 175 to make sure you're ready. Ride that wash machine for that climb just out of Timboon and you'll go fine. Let's get back to the race. So we're 5 hours into this race with 200 kilometers in the legs, meaning there's about 90 Ks left or just under. We've just been distanced from the group. We've come over that climb of Timboon and we've been distanced. We've been caught in bad position and now we're still trying to chase back on. There's still a glimpse of hope to get back onto the main group with the hope of being able to rejoin and ride home with the front group. The chain's nice and tight. We're still pushing 350, 400 watts in order to get back, and all we need is a glimmer of hope. All we need to see are some riders up the road, a bunch of cars in the convoy, because that's going to give us the carrot to keep pushing these pedals, to keep everybody motivated in order to get back to the main group. But the temperature's ticking over 30 degrees. We're 200 Ks into this race, 5 hours in. We're fried. Your mind is fried. Your legs are absolutely cooked. My feet are in absolute agony. But the impressive thing is, there's still a good group of guys together. We're some really strong riders here that are trying to bridge across. We've got super strong. There's Derek with the tats. Earlier we picked up Nick Harvey, I believe. He had some issues with his gears. There he is. So I think he's only got one gear. See if you can catch his cassette there. Peaks kit. Look at the salt stains on some of these riders. We're all absolutely cooked. I can't even pull turns. And I'm just hoping that these guys can tow us back. We've got the watts, but do we have the motivation from all the group to get back? Well, that part of the story will be untold very soon. So we're coming up to one of the last climbs of the race, and if you listen closely, you can hear what I think is someone putting spokes into a derailleur. Do you hear that noise there? I think there was a touch of wheels. Someone's spokes went into the derailleur. I couldn't figure out what happened. I didn't want to turn around because I would have crashed. We just had to keep pedaling. Now, the last time I did this race, this climb was actually all on gravel, which was a pretty crazy surprise. Thankfully this year it's been paved, although it was quite fun on the gravel, but it's hard to enjoy anything at this part of the race because you're that cooked. But there's still a glimmer of hope. We want to get over this climb. We've picked up a few more riders. There's Turner there riding past. We've picked up a few riders on this as gaps start to open. Now, I do not want to lose the main front group. There's Harvey pushing the hardest gear possible. Yeah, I reckon his chain's dropped down into the 11 there. So he's got one gear, or two gears rather. Your little ring or your big ring. I come underneath Lee here, and now we're trying to get over this hill to catch a glimpse to see if we can spot the convoy, the riders, because that's what I said before. All we need to see is that glimmer of hope. However, unfortunately, it wasn't meant to be. I nearly cried when I saw Aaron here in the Race Atlas vest hand me a feed bag. I was in all sorts of distress. I can't even explain the amount of pain you're in this deep into a race, and to see Aaron, you get or a teammate or whoever, I got quite emotional, and to dig into that bag and get a nice cold can of Coke, man, I smashed that thing in one go. So keep in mind, like, you do get sort of, I spoke about it earlier, you do get like nutrition fatigue, so make sure you do mix it up in your bottles. If you do have someone to swanny for you, ask them also not just carb mix, get some nice ice cold water, a Coke, a Solo, whatever, Fanta, because that's the sort of stuff that you need this deep into a race. 200 Ks in, you're in all sorts, you're like full lizard mode, and you're just doing what you can to keep your legs turning over. And don't forget to try to enjoy the little moments of this race. No matter how cooked you are or whatever, as soon as you come over out of Port Campbell and descend down onto essentially the surf coast here, I don't know what happens to me, man, when it's this deep in a race. I just get really emotional. I nearly cried seeing the bay, the Southern Ocean there. It's such a beautiful sight. And that cool air on your body is such a nice feeling. So, you know, Doesn't matter where you are in the world, no matter where you are in this race in particular, try to enjoy those little moments. Catch little glimpses of things to enjoy, to take your mind off the absolute pain your legs are going through to keep you in this race. I certainly did. You see me having a bit of a chat to the team. I'm not too sure who I was speaking to there. It could have been Hutto, it could have been anybody. Just keep fighting, keep turning the pedals over. We're in a good group of guys here, so making sure we all stay together and motivate ourselves to the finish line is really, really important. We're not going to win the race from here, but we can definitely make it a lot harder for ourselves if we're not able to stay with the main group. So the group that I was in, we picked up a few more riders along the way. So we had a good group of riders of maybe 20, 25 of us here. We made this left-hand turn onto Raglan Drive, and you can see the finish line in the distance. And you all know, for those who've been a regular viewer of the channel, know how much I love a full Hubbard sprint for like 50th, 60th position. I just can't get enough of it. This is no different. 1 kilometer left in this race, and look at us all jostling for position. It is so much fun. What is incredible about this is to think that Jensen launched an attack on this road with, I don't know how far it was, 600 meters to go, and managed to stay away. An incredible move to win this race, especially for a sprinter. Everyone would have thought he would have just lit it up with 200 to go, but to go long range like this just makes it even more impressive. This is where the sprint starts to light up. We've got Hutto on the right, we've got Tom in front of me, and there's Nick Harvey in his 53.11. He's seen a lot of that. He might need a new sprocket on the 11 there because he's been pretty much in it all day. Hutto flicks the elbow, he's done, and that's when we light up the sprint straight up in this brutal drag of Raglan Drive. And I'm just sitting in the draft. I'm looking nice and pretty. This is what I'm born to do, these final Hubbard sprints like this. But there's still a fair way to go, you know. There's almost 200 meters left in this race, and everyone's hit the front way too hard. Everyone's given up, as they should, and we roll to the line. And man, it is the most incredible experience to have still all these people on the side of the road here cheering, applauding us for the efforts that we've done. Oh, geez, that is a wrap for this week's Fresh Crits video. It's a long one, so I hope you were able to get through it. I hope you got a little bit from this video, and if you did, make sure you tell your friends, get them to watch it, check it out. If you spot yourself, chuck it in the comments below. Like, subscribe, throw a few shekels if you dig it, and I'll see you all next time. Thanks again for watching, everyone. Good luck. Ciao.